the muscle car era, a time when gas was cheap, cops had to actually catch you to give you a ticket, and the only thing that mattered was how fast you could launch off that line. The US was cranking out Camaros, Mustangs, and Chargers like it was their national duty. But what if I told you some of the fastest, rarest, and meanest muscle cars of the era weren't even available in America? Wait, what are you talking about? That's right. While Americans were busy arguing over big blocks and small blocks, Canada was quietly hoarding some of the coolest muscle cars ever built. Cars so rare that even hardcore muscle car fans might not know they exist. Imagine this, it's 1969. You see a car in a magazine, a V8 monster that looks like it could leave your Chevelle begging for mercy. You rush to your local dealer ready to drop cash, and then you find out it's only available in Canada. Sorry, buddy, looks like you're packing your bags and heading north. So grab a Tim Hortons coffee, apologize to someone for no reason, and prepare to have your mind blown as we dive in to the Canadian muscle cars that Americans never got to own. And trust me, you're gonna wish they did. 1970 Mercury Cougar XR7, the fancy cat that Americans couldn't tame. Picture this. It's 1970. You walk into a Mercury dealership in the US ready to buy a Cougar XR7. You see it on the lot, but something feels off. You've heard rumors of a special edition, one with exclusive colors, premium interior touches, and just a bit more class. Oh, sorry, that version? Only available in Canada. That's right, while Americans got the standard XR7, Canada got an upgraded, classier version with some unique trim and colors, but don't let the fancy touches fool you. This thing could still throw down. 351 cubic inch V8, 300 horsepower, 385 foot-pounds of torque, 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds, top speed 120 miles an hour. It looked like a muscle car, but it felt like the kind of car James Bond would drive if he had a Canadian passport. 1969 Pontiac Grand Prix XN, Canada's secret luxury muscle. The Pontiac Grand Prix was already a powerhouse, but Canada decided to make it even better. This special edition was built on the Chevy Impala platform, but Pontiac gave it their own styling, their own tweaks, and an engine lineup that would make any muscle car fan jealous. 358 V8 for the sensible drivers, 427 V8 with 390 horsepower for the maniacs, 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds with a top speed of 125 miles an hour. The front end was pure Pontiac aggression. The rear was smooth and clean, and the whole car had an air of sophistication. Like a guy who wears a leather jacket but also knows how to drink wine properly. Americans, they got a Grand Prix. Canadians got a Grand Prix with attitude. 1966 Beaumont SD 396, the muscle-bound Frankenstein. You walk into a dealership and there's a car that looks like a Chevelle, but something's off. The grille is different, the badging is unfamiliar, the name doesn't make sense. Congratulations! You've just met the Beaumont SD 396. This car was a Pontiac Chevy matchup with a body that screamed Chevelle, but a heart that was 100% Canadian muscle. 396 cubic inch V8 up to 375 horsepower, 0 to 60 in about 6 seconds. Americans had their Chevelles, sure, but this was a Chevelle with a bit of a Canadian twist, like adding maple syrup to your coffee. 1969 Acadian Canso, a Canada-only version of the Nova with unique styling and a 327 V8 that made it a legitimate street weapon. 350 horsepower, 360 foot-pounds of torque, 0 to 60 in 7 seconds, top speed 120 miles an hour. It was a Nova that Americans couldn't buy, which made it even more desirable. 1971 Plymouth GTX, the gentleman's muscle car with a Canadian twist. The Plymouth GTX was already one of the best muscle cars of its era, but Canada decided to tweak it just a little bit. Under the hood, a 440 cubic inch V8 with enough torque to tow the entire province of Ontario. 375 horsepower, 480 foot-pounds of torque, 0 to 60 in 6 seconds, top speed of 140 miles an hour. It was a muscle car, sure, but it was also luxurious, smooth, and refined. It was the muscle car you could take on a date and still impress your in-laws. 1974 Pontiac GTO Canadian Edition. The last true GTO, sorta. Alright, this one's technically not a true Canadian muscle car, but it absolutely deserves a spot here. Why? Because while Americans got the most disappointing GTO ever, Canada got something that actually still looked and felt like a muscle car. In the US, the 74 GTO was stuck on the compact Ventura platform with a weak 200 HP 350 V8. Meanwhile, in Canada, Pontiac kept the Le Mans-based GTO alive, offering a choice between two big block bruisers that gave it real muscle. Under the hood, 400 or 455 cubic inch V8, because Canada wasn't giving up on power. Up to 250 horsepower, 370 foot-pounds of torque. Still respectable for the smog-choked 70s. 0 to 60 in around 7 seconds, better than the American version, which felt like it needed a pep talk. Why was it special? This was Pontiac's last real muscle car before the GTO name faded into obscurity. While Americans were stuck with a shrinking underpowered version, Canadians got the last GTO worthy of the name. Imagine being an American Pontiac fan in 1974 dreaming of a proper GTO only to get a slightly angrier Ventura. Then you find out Canada still has the full-size V8 powered GTO. Final verdict, the US GTO was like ordering a steak and getting tofu. The Canadian version? It was the last real GTO before Pontiac pulled the plug, making it an honorary Canadian muscle legend. 1969 Mercury Meteor Montego S-33, Canada's hidden Cobra jet monster. If you were an American, you could go buy a Mercury Cyclone, but if you were Canadian, you got the Meteor Montego S-33. 428 Cobra Jet V8, 335 horsepower, 440 foot-pounds of torque, 0 to 60 in 6.5, and a top speed of 130 miles an hour. It looked aggressive, sounded mean, and was just rare enough that most Americans didn't even know it existed. 3. 1967 Pontiac Parisienne 2+2, the full-size Canadian powerhouse. You ever see a car that looks way too classy to be fast? Like the kind of ride a mafia boss would use to show up at a fancy steakhouse, but the second he leaves the parking lot, he's burning rubber down the freeway? Under the hood, 427 cubic inch V8, because Canada doesn't do small. 385 horsepower, 460 foot-pounds of torque, enough to move mountains or at least outrun a Mustang. 0 to 60 in 7 seconds, impressive for a car the size of a small apartment. Top speed 120 miles an hour, and probably terrifying at that speed. Why was it special? First off, it looked expensive, long, sleek, and just dripping with chrome. If James Bond had a Canadian cousin who spent his weekends drag racing for pink slips, this is what he'd drive. And the interior? Oh, it wasn't just about muscle. It had bucket seats, wood grain trim, and a dashboard that looked like it belonged in a yacht. This was a muscle car for the guy who liked burnouts but also appreciated fine whiskey. But the best part, you couldn't get this in the US. Pontiac made sure that this beauty was strictly for Canada. Americans could get the Catalina 2+2, but it wasn't the same. It didn't have the same unique trim, the same luxury feel, or the same exclusivity. Picture being an American in 1967, spotting this beast and rushing to your Pontiac dealer, only to be told you'd have to move to Canada to get one. Final verdict, a big, luxurious bruiser that proved cars could have class, but only if you were Canadian. 1966 Pontiac Laurentian, a muscle car in disguise. At first glance, the Pontiac Laurentian looked like something your dad would drive to work or your grandma would take to Sunday brunch. It wasn't. Under the hood, 396 cubic inch V8, because even family cars in Canada needed muscle. 325 horsepower, 410 foot-pounds of torque, enough to surprise anyone at a stoplight. 0 to 60 in 7.5 seconds. Not bad for a car that looked like it came with a coupon book in the glove box. Why was it special? This was Pontiac's undercover muscle car. A sleeper that could blend in at a grocery store parking lot but turn into a tire-shredding beast when the light turned green. Imagine rolling up next to a cocky Mustang driver, giving him a polite nod, then leaving him in a cloud of tire smoke while he wonders how he just got dusted by a family sedan. Final verdict, the Laurentian was a muscle car in a trench coat, a full-fledged bruiser, pretending to be responsible. And unless you lived in Canada, you never knew it existed. 1970 Chevrolet Biscayne 427, the ultimate sleeper. At first glance, the 1970 Chevrolet Biscayne looked like your grandpa's Sunday cruiser. Big, plain, and about as exciting as a tax return, but under the hood, it was an absolute monster. Under the hood, 427 cubic inch V8 because nothing says sleeper like stuffing a Corvette engine into a plain-looking sedan. 425 horsepower, 460 foot-pounds of torque, enough to make muscle car guys do a double take. 0 to 60 in 6 seconds, shockingly quick for something that looked like it should have a CB radio and a box of tissues on the dash. Top speed, 135 miles an hour. Terrifying in a car with bench seats and no spoilers.
250 turbo thrift. Not going to win you any drag races, but you know what? How much fun.
Why it was special. This was the ultimate gotcha car. Some guy in a flashy Camaro pulls up next to you, revs his engine, laughs at your grandpa's special. The light turns green, and suddenly he's inhaling your tire smoke, questioning everything he knows about life. The Biscayne 427 was the muscle car equivalent of a librarian who moonlights as a cage fighter. It was big, unassuming, and absolutely devastating on the streets. Final verdict? This was Canada's best-kept muscle car secret. No badges, no stripes, no nonsense. Just pure, unfiltered power. And if you were in the US, too bad, you weren't getting one. And there you have it, Canadian muscle cars that Americans never got. Some were faster, some were fancier, and some were so brutally powerful they probably would have been illegal in California anyway. Imagine being an American car guy in the 60s, flipping through a magazine, spotting one of these beasts and thinking, wow, I need that. Then get to the fine print that says only available in Canada. And just like that, another American considers moving north, until they remember the winners. So, which of these forbidden muscle cars do you wish made it to the States? Did we miss any? Drop a comment below and let's argue about it. And hey, if you love underrated muscle cars, rare classics, and the occasional joke at America's expense, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that bell.